Hey guys, in this video I'm going to review Scott Adkins' new movie Accident Man 2 Hitman's Holiday. It's out today, Friday, October 14th in the US. Get it in select theaters, video on demand, platforms like Amazon Prime, Vudu, etc. And then I believe 2 weeks out elsewhere in the world. So anyway, as far as the film, this is of course a sequel to its predecessor, 2018's Accident Man, based on a UK comic from the early 90s that, funny enough, Scott Adkins actually ran across as a kid.
So the first one was a comic book when I was a kid. Came out, Accident Man, and I saw it there. It was quite an obscure comic book. And it was by chance that I found it. I just saw it and I thought, oh, that looks cool. So I took it home and I read it and I loved it. And I kept this comic book and I kept rereading it. I was about 14. And I always thought to myself, man, this is going to make a great film. Somebody should make this. And nobody ever did.
The original film saw Mike Fallon on a revenge mission trying to find out who killed his ex-girlfriend and why. So the first film had to take on a more serious tone overall, and it made sense for him to go into Charles Bronson Death Wish territory. Of course, it had its comedic moments, and while I quite enjoyed the first film, I wasn't quite on board with the character, at least not initially. I don't know if I like this guy. You know, he's just killing guys so he could buy a new motorcycle, and then he's beating up guys at a bar to reduce his, stress, or I think you call it
PMT. That's straight out of the comic book. Don't get into trouble, anyone. Post-mode attention. Post-mode attention before you get ideas, but
Yeah, so when I was watching it, I was like, I don't really know if I like this guy.
He's a bad seed.
But then, you know, as the story progressed and you really wanted to find out what happened to your ex-girlfriend and all that, it's like, okay, I could go along with this guy. I'm with them. I want to find out too. And the character wasn't quite as cold, I guess, right?
That was a pretty good punch.
We could warm up to him.
Yeah, I think that was an issue. I mean, that's how it was in the comic book. But we're actually using a story in this which is not from the series of comic books. It's completely just invented from scratch.
After offing most of his co-workers in the original, Mike Fallon had to.
I grabbed my fake passport and hopped on the first flight to anywhere, which turned out to be Malta.
Speaking of Malta, it's a great location for the sequel. It's so picturesque and shot so well. It goes a long way in helping to add production value and sets the film apart from its predecessor, which also helps soften the overall tone. It's brighter, more colorful, and just more visually appealing. Sequels generally have to be bigger and badder, and Hitman's Holiday succeeds on that front. The story's kind of a cross between John Wick 3, The Bodyguard, and Deadpool. John Wick 3 in the sense that there's a whole small army of assassins that have to be contended with. The Bodyguard, as far as Scott has to protect a life, in this case a fearsome mafia heiress boss's wannabe pop star son, who happens to be a complete imbecile and often runs towards danger instead of away from it. And there are definitely Deadpool vibes here in the sense of crazy dark humor mixed with fun action sequences. In this case, as in the case with most of Scott's work, martial arts mayhem. The original film was directed by Jesse V. Johnson, who often works with Scott. The reason he wasn't on board with this one had to do with other projects Jesse was busy working on at the time of this film's production. But everything worked out quite well with the Kirby brothers, George and Harry, who have experience in working in the stunt world as well as creating several popular short films. Scott Adkins met George Kirby while working on Doctor Strange, Kirby having served as Benedict Cumberbatch's stuntman on the film, and Scott had been impressed by some of the short films directed by the Kirby brothers, and that led Scott wanting them aboard Hitman's Holiday. Long story short, they did a fantastic job on their directorial debut for a feature film, and not just with the action, which was a given based on their background and of course Scott's. The audience needs more than just great action though, and Hitman's Holiday certainly delivers. We get quite a bit of comedy in this one that has you genuinely laughing. Scott's sense of comedic timing, delivery, and overall natural chemistry between the other characters really allow him to shine outside of the action. Although being a hitman and a loner of sorts, a romantic relationship develops between Scott and one of the other hitmen from the first film, Finicky Fred. Although it's of course a zany, crazy story full of action, dark humor, and ridiculous though memorable and entertaining characters, when Fred is taken hostage, we're on board, as who wouldn't want to save the life of their romantic partner? This goes a long way in making the film more of a human story. Finicky Fred, by the way, is similar to Q from the James Bond films, but instead of creating gadgets for 007, he and Scott come up with unique ways to kill people and make them look like accidents, of course. But not all of these experiments go so well. Overall, the scenes in the makeshift workshop are quite comical due to their absurdity, and one pays off in a big way closer to the end of the film when finishing off Poco the Clown. Speaking of Poco, Beau Fowler gives an incredible performance, and I believe his character in this could easily carry an entire movie himself. Another standout character is Sue Lang, the martial arts-infused sadomasochistic relationship she has with Scott. He essentially uses Sue Lang to help sharpen his skills. As a martial artist, she surpasses his character Mike Fallon in every way, and he leans on her later in the film as an ally. I feel it's natural though, not forced in order to check off a woke box at having a female that kicks more ass than men, so it's not contrived or anything. Every fight in the film is good in different ways. The fight against Ninja Yumi, played by Jackie Chan's stunt performer Andy Long, is pure Hong Kong action cinema. The fight against Poco the Clown is comically absurd, hard-hitting, and pure entertainment. You'll especially like the way he's finished off, which, as I mentioned, set up prior from an ingenious way Finicky Fred sets a trap. We see Scott really put on a great display with the bow staff while squaring off against Yendi, the vampire. The comedic buffoonery of the kid he's trying to protect, Dante, is interjected well in some of the fights, which helps break them up and allows you to catch your breath. A complaint I often have in some of these newer action films is like, it's too much, like it just goes on and they don't quite have the pacing right. It's just non-stop. That is not the case with Hitman's Holiday. As far as the comedy goes, it's dark yet lighthearted, if that makes sense. I mean, look at Dante, the guy Scott's trying to protect. He ends up looking like Harry at a high school prom. That's quite a memorable scene, by the way, of how that happens. Not to give it away, but there's quite a bit of gore used in a comedic way. If you enjoy the Deadpool movies, you'll certainly enjoy this. Overall, this was Scott's passion project. Not only did he star in it, he produced it, did some fight choreography, worked on the story with his longtime collaborator and friend Stu Small. His own production company, 6 Demon Films, put this together, so he's got his hand all over the production, and it works quite well. It's actually quite amazing what he and the team were able to do in 22 days, so good job. Highly recommended, highly entertaining. I'm really looking forward to part 3 if they ever do that, because I think the Mike Fallon character is his best yet, more so than Boyka. Speaking of which, I don't think we're going to get another movie with Boyka. I don't think we're going to get another ninja movie, because basically those were pirated so much that the producers really can't justify putting up money to create a new one if they're not going to get a return. So you guys got to support this in the right way. It's great that those movies have an audience, but it would be even better if they had a paying audience. So support this film. Highly entertaining. You're going to like it, but it's really the only way that we're going to get Accident Man 3. And trust me, if you watch this one, you're going to want the third one.